everyone, what is up? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, I'm Maddie. I'm a K-5 STEM teacher and ed tech coach in Los Angeles. I post weekly tech tutorials for teachers, and in today's video, I'm going to be sharing some tips and strategies for implementing Genius Hour in your elementary classroom. I love Genius Hour. I'm super excited about today's video because it's really going to be an in-depth explanation on how to plan Genius Hour from start to finish. I'll also have some additional resources linked in the video description bar down below in case you guys would like to check those out. I'll have a blog post, a Genius Hour passion project planner that I put together, so be sure to check out the links in the video description down below as well. So without further ado, let's get started. So Genius Hour is this idea that started at tech companies where employees are allotted 20% of their time to pursue their own passion projects. Many companies have found that because of Genius Hour, employees have become more creative, they've become more innovative, and they've even become more productive. I know personally I would love to have something like Genius Hour in my workplace for myself to be able to pursue my own passion project. Some of the most amazing products have stemmed from Genius Hour at tech companies like Google, for example. Products like Gmail and Google News actually came from Genius Hour. I don't know about you guys, but I use Gmail every single day, and that's a product that came directly from a Genius Hour. Now, because teachers are so creative, they found really wonderful application for Genius Hour in the classroom. So the very first stage of Genius Hour is to have students select a topic. The second stage is to have students write research questions. The third stage is to have students do their research. The fourth stage is to have students create and build their projects. And then lastly, the fifth stage is to have students share. So first, I recommend for the selecting topics page that teachers spend about 2 to 3 days helping students brainstorm and select their topics. For the writing research questions stage, I usually recommend for this one that teachers spend about 4 to 5 days helping students learn about research questions, helping students write their research questions, and then ultimately selecting the research question that is going to then guide the next step, which is their research. For the research stage, I typically like to recommend that teachers allow for about 1 to 2 weeks for the research stage. Then for creating, another week again to build their projects, this creating stage here. And then lastly, for the share stage, I typically recommend about 1 to 2 days, depending on how many students you have in your class. So now for stage number 1, students select their topics. So first in this selecting a topic stage, I recommend that you just start off this lesson with some very general ways to get to know your students. Depending on what time of the school year it might be, you might know your students really well, but this is a great time for students to reflect on their own interests. So you might ask students questions like, what are your strengths and stretches in school? What do you like to do outside of school? What subjects are you interested in? And what do you like to do for fun? So those are just some initial questions that you can ask students to get them thinking about the things that they're passionate about, the things that they're interested in, either inside or outside of school. Then next, I typically recommend that teachers do some sort of I wonder type activity with students. Right now, you're looking at an example of an I wonder page that I put together where students basically just spend time writing or drawing images of things that they're curious about, things that they wonder. And then once it's time for students to select a topic, there's really a lot of choice here. If you are aligning your Genius Hour to a specific subject area, like the solar system, for example, you might want students to select a specific planet. However, in the example I'm providing today, this is very open-ended, where students can select pretty much any topic that's school appropriate that they're passionate about. So next, we're moving on to stage number 2, writing questions. Writing research questions, in my opinion, might be the trickiest part of Genius Hour for elementary students. However, I do think it is probably one of the most important stages. This stage specifically is a really great time to help students learn about high-quality research questions. So right now, we're looking at an anchor chart here that I might recommend that you try with students on the very first day that you're teaching them about research questions. You can say something like, a great research question begins with the question words why or how. What are some examples of some research questions that you might ask? Now you can have students take turns sharing potential research questions or questions that start with these words, why or how. Or if you feel like that might be a little bit tricky for your students, you as the teacher can also come prepared with some examples of some research questions. So for example, the ones that I have on this anchor chart here, how can we reduce food waste at our school? And how do engineers design a fast and thrilling roller coaster? So you'll see that these are two very different examples of subject areas, but they're strong research questions because they both start with how, which is one of our main question words in terms of asking research questions. They also have a very specific subject that's clear what the student is actually going to be researching. So for the first one, that's going to be food waste. And for the second one, that is going to be roller coasters and engineering. This is also a great time to help students learn about just right research questions. Basically what that means is that students should be asking questions that are not yes/no questions. They should be asking questions that aren't, so easily solved by a quick Google search, but also questions that aren't too complex that there's not an answer. So finding those just right research questions is really important to creating a high quality research question for Genius Hour. Next, it's time for stage number 3, the research stage. The research stage is a really great time for students to practice their researching skills. They'll practice note-taking, they'll practice distinguishing fact from fiction. That's a great lesson related to digital citizenship that you can help students with. They'll learn about different mediums for doing research. So for example, I'd highly recommend if you have a librarian at your school that you could possibly reach out to, you could reach out to them to maybe help you select books or different areas that students might be able to research, different mediums. So you can help students learn that they can look for research online with help from a trusted adult. They can use books for research, they can talk to experts. There's a variety of different mediums that students can use for research. Again, when I was talking about a little bit ago how you can really incorporate these research ELA standards, this is a great place. So if you look up your grade levels ELA standards, you can see the standards that are related to research and figure out how you can incorporate those in this research stage of Genius Hour. Next, we have at step number 4, students create and build their projects. The creation and building stage is by far the most fun for elementary students in my experience. Students let their creativities and imaginations run wild. They have so much fun building their projects. There's a variety of different mediums too that they can use to actually create their public product. I'm very passionate about project-based learning. It's something that's very key to my classroom as a teacher. And with every great project-based learning unit, there's typically some sort of public product that comes at the end of the unit. Now that's true of Genius Hour as well. So students are working towards creating some sort of public product. Now this public product can really be up to students. Now, if you feel like your students need some scaffolding here, you can provide them with a list of a couple of different options for how they can display their work or show their work. For example, you could give students the choice to create a digital book. You could give them the choice to create a cardboard model. You could have them create a blog post. It kind of depends on the grade level that you're teaching. I've seen some really great Genius Hour projects that are made using stop motion animation. I've seen some really great short films. I've seen some really great high quality websites that students have created using Google Sites. That's typically going to be better if you're teaching 5th grade. I've seen great TED style talks where students use a couple of different Google slides and they practice their presentation skills. And then I've also seen students create comic books. They can do this either digitally through an app like Comic Life, or they can create their own comic book using just paper and crayons and colored pencils. So this is really meant to be open-ended. If you do feel like your students do need some more structure here, like I said, you can provide them with a couple of different options that they can choose from. Then lastly, for the share portion of Genius Hour. Of course, sharing is something that is so much fun about Genius Hour. Students can share their work with the class, they can share their work with the school, or they can even share their work with the greater community. You can do this either by having students give individual presentations. You could do this by having some sort of museum walk or gallery walk across your classroom where students can go look at each other's models, look at the things that they've created. There's a bunch of different ways that you can do this. Now, depending on how many students you have in your class, you might want to consider breaking this up into 2 separate days, or if you do have the flexibility in your schedule for it to take up a longer chunk of time, you can do this during just 1 class period. Lastly, let's talk about assessment. Anytime I get a question from teachers about Genius Hour, it's almost always related to assessment and grading. And I totally get it, grading Genius Hour can be really tricky, but I'd highly recommend that when you do grade your Genius Hour project, that you're grading for process over product. That's something that's really critical to Genius Hour. Instead of just grading students' final product, it's important to think about how you can grade the entire process. Now, I've put together a rubric of something that you might use to grade process over product. Now, because the Genius Hour example that I provided today is not tied to a specific grade level, I did not incorporate any state standards here per se. However, it is a nice way to show you how you can structure your rubric and give students feedback and assess their work based off of their process over their product. So right now we're looking at the rubric that I've created, and I'm recommending that you grade your Genius Hour projects based on the 5 key pillars that you'll see on the left-hand side. So these 5 key pillars are the 5 stages that I emphasized throughout this video. So I'm just gonna walk you through what an exceeds standards in Genius Hour at the elementary level might look like. So first we have brainstorming, develops many creative and innovative ideas. For writing research questions, we have writes strong, thought-provoking research questions. For researching, we have is able to synthesize research and draw meaningful connections. For creating and building, we have always creates a prototype that they can explain. And then lastly, for sharing, we have always is able to go above and beyond to share, and most importantly, reflect on a prototype in creative ways. Now, of course, this is just a recommendation. Feel free to adapt this rubric to meet your classroom needs or to meet your specific standards. At the end of the day, I'm always saying, you guys know your classroom and your students better than I do, so make sure that you're just adapting anything that I've shared in today's video, not just this rubric, to meet the needs of your specific classroom. So thank you so much for watching today's video on how to implement Genius Hour in your elementary classroom. I'd highly recommend that you check out the links in the video description down below. I put together a very in-depth blog post that's even more in-depth than this video that really walks you through every single stage and helps you out with the planning even more than this video does. Additionally, I also have a Genius Hour Passion Project Planner that's been a hit with teachers all across the country, so I'd recommend that you check that one out as well if you're interested. It's a nice guide for students that they can have in a centralized place where they can keep all of their work related to Genius Hour. So thank you again for watching today's video. If you liked it, be sure to give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already. I post weekly tech tutorials for teachers, and I'll see you back here soon. Bye, friends.